Good morning, friends. I hope that you enjoyed the first 3 chapters of Mrs. Patty is Batty. I'm going to continue reading a few more chapters today. We're going to start with chapter number 4. The Emperor has no clothes. It's really hard to concentrate on schoolwork when your teacher is dressed up like a giant bonbon. All I could think about was the candy I would be getting when we went trick-or-treating after school. My mouth was watering, but Miss Stacy was trying her best to teach us. If you go trick-or-treating and they give out Kit Kats at 5 houses, and Milky Ways at 3 houses, and Hershey bars at 7 houses, how many candy bars will you have altogether? AJ? Is anybody giving out Snickers? I asked. That's irrelevant, said Miss Stacy. No, it's not, I told her. An elephant is a big animal with a long trunk. Everybody laughed, even though I didn't say anything funny. I hate Snickers, said Neil, the nude kid. My favorite candy bar is 3 Musketeers. Let's try to stay on task, shall we? Said Miss Stacy. Teachers are always telling us to stay on task. That means we have to talk about boring stuff instead of interesting stuff, like candy bars. I like Twizzlers, said Ryan. Twizzlers aren't candy bars, Michael said. They're licorice. Ugh, licorice is yucky, said Neil, the nude kid. It gives candy a bad name. We went on like that for a while. Nobody could agree on which candy bar was the best. After a while, Miss Stacy gave up trying to teach anything. All this math talk is making me hungry, she said. We were all excited to march around in our costumes, but Miss Stacy said it wasn't time yet. Finally, after 1,100,000 years, an announcement came over the loudspeaker. It's time for the parade, Mrs. Patty exclaimed. Please bring all classes to the playground. Yay! Everybody yelled. Miss Stacy told us to line up boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. I think she does that so each of us has to be next to somebody we hate. I had to stand behind annoying Emily, the queen of crybabies. We marched in single file to the playground. The whole school was out there in their costumes. It was cool. Even the grown-ups were dressed up. Miss Hannah, our art teacher, dressed up like a famous artist named Picasso. Miss Small, our gym teacher, dressed up like a famous baseball player named Babe Ruth. Mrs. Cormel, our bus driver, dressed up like a famous NASCAR racer named Jeff Gordon. Mrs. Rupee, our librarian, dressed up like a famous children's book author who I never heard of before. Authors are boring. A lot of the parents came out to see the parade. I saw my mom near the monkey bars. She waved and took a picture of me in my penguin costume. We marched all the way around the playground. I thought that would be... Here's a picture. The end of the parade, but then we had to march around the playground again. It was starting to get boring. I was sweating in my penguin costume. I was tired. I didn't want to march anymore. My space helmet was fogged up and it was getting hard to see out of it. I was sick of the dumb parade. I just wanted to go trick-or-treating and get candy. I needed candy. But that's when the most amazing thing in the history of the world happened. I stepped on Emily's queen costume. I didn't mean to step on Emily's queen costume. Really, I was minding my own business, marching around the playground. But her dumb train thing was dragging on the ground behind her, and I couldn't see through my space helmet, and I guess I got too close to her and I stepped on the train. It would have been okay, except that Emily kept right on walking like she didn't even know I was standing on her train. What a dumbhead. Anyway, it must have been some cheap costume because it ripped really easily. The next thing anybody knew, Emily's whole costume was on the ground and not on Emily. Look, somebody shouted, underwear! Well, the only thing funnier than getting someone to say underwear is actually seeing someone in their underwear. That's the first rule of being a kid, and Emily was standing in the middle of the playground in her underwear. There were even flowers on it. Everybody was pointing and laughing. It was hilarious, a real Kodak moment. And we saw it live and in person. You should have been there. I hope my mom took a picture. Eek! Emily screamed, AJ stepped on my train. It's a train wreck, I said. Get it? But Emily didn't think my joke was very funny. She started crying, of course, and went running off the playground. I don't even know where she went. Well, Nana boo-boo on Emily. That's what she gets for dressing up like a dumb queen anyway. Chapter 5, I Rule the School. We marched around the playground for about 1,100,000 hours. Finally, the dumb parade was over and we could go home. Or at least I thought we could go home. First, we all had to go back inside the school and sit in the all-purpose room. There was a fancy chair up on stage. It was like one of those chairs you see in a palace. When all the classes were seated, music started playing, and some tall guy came into the all-purpose room dressed up like a king. He was wearing a gold cape, and he was holding a big sword. It was Mr. Klutz, our principal. Even though he was wearing a crown on his head, I knew it was him because he is completely bald. I mean, completely. Off with their heads, Mr. Klutz shouted as he marched down the center aisle. Let them eat cake. Miss Daisy told us that in the old days, kings were constantly chopping off people's heads and making them eat cake. That must have been a cool time to live. I like to eat cake, but I don't think I would like the chopping off your head part very much. I rule the school, Mr. Klutz announced as he sat in the fancy chair. Quiet down or you will be thrown in the dungeon in the basement. That was a complete lie. Everybody knows the dungeon is on the 3rd floor. Cool costume, Mr. Klutz, some kid yelled. Silence, Mr. Klutz hollered. I know not this Klutz person of whom you speak. I am King Louis XIV of France. Why are you dressed up like a king? Ryan asked. As king, he replied, I need not to worry about parent-teacher conferences and behavior problems and head lice and bus schedules and test scores. I am all-powerful. What I say goes. Mr. Klutz was talking just like a real king. It was cool. After he finished acting all king-like, he talked to us about Halloween safety. He told us to have fun trick-or-treating, but to look both ways before we crossed the street. He said we shouldn't go inside any strange houses, and we shouldn't eat any candy that isn't wrapped up. What should we do if we come to a house and they don't give us any candy? Asked one of the 3rd graders. Off with their heads, said Mr. Klutz. What if some kids don't get any candy? Asked one of the 1st graders. Let them eat cake. Mr. Klutz enjoyed being king a little too much, if you ask me. I couldn't wait to get out of school because, well, I can't wait to get out of school every day. But this day was special because we would be going trick-or-treating and getting candy. Finally, the bell rang and we got out of school. Everybody poured out the front door. Free at last, Michael shouted. It's candy time, Ryan yelled. Mrs. Patty was standing on the front steps of the school in her witch costume. Her warts still didn't fall off. She told us again that we should make sure to trick-or-treat at her house because she has more candy than anyone in town. And remember, she said, don't let the Halloween monster catch you. The what? I've never heard of the Halloween monster, I said. Oh, sure, said Mrs. Patty. Every year, the Halloween monster chops up kids, steals their candy, and keeps it for himself. Yikes! The Halloween monster? I looked at Michael. Michael looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at me. And then we all tore out of there as fast as we could.